Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Kristen, and our panel. I'm Milad Barame with General Dynamics Information Technology. I'm Vice President over our HHS operations group. We are going to get to the panel that was planned, but before we do that, we're going to have a quick conversation with Jose Arrieta, Chief Information Officer for Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you. Good morning, folks. My name's Troy Schneider. I'm the editor of FCW, and there's been a little bit of a schedule change as, there we go.
It's always confusing.
As Jose Arrieta, as many of you know, is the CIO at HHS and has been for about a hot minute.
6 days.
Yeah, and
fully gray.
So as part of that, his schedule has blown up, and there are other meetings, and so he has to duck out before this panel that he was going to moderate. So as punishment, they've sent him up here to answer questions from me for a few minutes.
That's why you can't make friends in this business, because you feel bad leaving them.
Yeah. So blockchain has come up a lot today, and blockchain is far from the only emerging tech topic, but it is it's been sort of one of the key building blocks here. And Jose's been working on that first at GSA, building an interesting pilot program there of using blockchain in the acquisition space. In your job at HHS up until 6 days ago, of really working on the procurement and purchasing data. And now turning to what can be done agency-wide, not just with blockchain, but really sort of thinking about how to bring emerging tech in. And so I'm curious how you're changing your perspective as you move to thinking about the whole department. How do you start leveraging the lessons from HHS Accelerate and other projects to drive change at a place as big as HHS?
So given that I've had a ton of days to think about this, first of all, really an honor to be here and great to see all of you, and I apologize that I can't stay for the panel. Troy, appreciate you doing this. I think there's three things that we're looking at. Number one, how do you strategically move data to the cloud, and how do you actually create a set of tools that can be reused across a large department like HHS to move data to the cloud? Now in HHS Accelerate, which you can see back there at that table, we've actually created a framework that is ATO'd to move data from legacy mainframes to a cloud environment. We're indexing it to Hyperledger Fabric. You don't have to. We're storing it in a certain manner. We're building containerized microservices off of that. We have that framework ATO'd. So what we want to do is wash and reuse that framework multiple times. When you think about an agency the size of HHS, you're not going to change it top down. So what you want to do, I think, and what we're going to try to do, and if Sherry's here anywhere, make sure that you talk to her. Sherry Sokol, I don't see her. But what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to pilot a couple different things immediately out of the gates at HHS. So I actually talked to Sherry and her team at DISA, and I think one of the things we're going to do is we're going to try to secure the edge of the network from an identity perspective. We're going to try to pilot a wearable device or a mobile phone that uses behavioral information to create identity at the edge of a network. And what DISA needs is a distributed network to actually test whether they can secure identity at the edge of the network on a wireless device. They have the wireless device. They have the behavioral capability to actually determine identity with a high-level confidence score. Now they need a network of nodes to test that. So we're going to partner with DISA. We're going to actually test that. I'm meeting with them third week of June. And I think we'll be able to scale that model very rapidly. In a lot of the spaces where we have first responders, that identity is very important, and logging in and multi-factor identification doesn't actually work for the nature of their job. The ability to create identity at the edge of the network without pushing it to the edge of the network without worrying about the underlying infrastructure is very important in the medical device industry, specifically in the IoT space. And we want to be the leader in the IoT space. One of the things the Secretary has asked me to work on is how can we actually create a ripple and say, well, if government can do this, we want to see private sector industry actually invest in this capabilities. We think this identity idea and using sensor technology to push identity edge of the network is one of those ideas. The other thing that's really interesting is the infrastructure of Accelerate actually facilitates ingest of data, organization of data, and access to data by a number of different players. So we're actually in pretty intense conversations with both the Army and the Air Force who have an interest in either replicating Accelerate or making an investment in Accelerate. so that they can use it within their mission space. So, for those of you that don't think blockchain can work, it's actually working. It's actually working at scale. Simple as that. We do have the challenge of multi-tenant, multi-node, bidirectional communication, but we think we've actually solved that. Within the interagency of HHS, we think we can solve it more broadly across government. There is a challenge there, but we think we've come up with a solution, just looking for a partner to test it. So those are kind of the immediate 30, 60, 90-day, create a presence in the space to actually show that we can change in government and hope that industry will invest to actually drive some of those changes. Industry is much better making those changes. Look, intergovernmental to partner. We thank our folks at DISA Air Force and the Army for their partnership. And then, wash and reuse what you already have. If you have a framework that allows you to move to cloud, that allows you to index data, that allows you to use a containerized microservices architecture to actually modernize, you should wash and reuse that capability over and over again. So short term, in the first 6 days, those are the types of things that I'm thinking about.
And you went very helpfully to my next question, which is, it's almost like we planned this, which we didn't. And the idea of how you get these experiments working together and start to bring scale in government. You talk about partnering with DISA. There are projects at CDC, at CBP that are really trying to move to use distributed ledgers in interesting ways. How do you get those efforts working together, or at least comparing notes without turning Accelerate into a government-wide shared service or something that is probably at a scale and complexity that the team doesn't want to tackle right now?
Troy always finds a way to ask a question that's unanswerable. I think that, the other day I was in some meeting, I don't even remember, and they said, pick a picture that you resonate with most. And I picked a picture of a sign that was pointing with an arrow pointing in both directions. And I said, the great thing about this moment in time in this job is that I can go in either direction. Right? So I don't know the answer to your question, but what I do know is in some areas it's partnering and saying, here's the Accelerate infrastructure, why don't we establish a node for you, establish the business service layer. That's a core capability to ingest data and to do something with data off of it. And then you can build whatever you want off it. And in some areas it's replicating all the core microservices and providing it to them. So it's all about building a relationship at a level where you can actually partner with an organization that wants to make change. And then not having pride and ownership over what you're doing. I don't see my job as actually, we are reimagining the CIO. First of all, we are reimagining the CIO function of HHS, and you'll hear that over and over and over again as I, continue in this role. We're going to reimagine how the CIO function works. And I personally don't see it as how much can you control. I personally see it as how much change can you actually instigate? How much change can you actually test and kind of share with other folks so they can actually scale it. That's the way that we look at it. I want the ability to partner fully if I have to, and I want the ability to provide documentation on the framework that was ATO'd, and maybe provide the core infrastructure, some information on the core infrastructure so that you can go and scale it yourself if you want to. Innovation is something that's never efficient, but it becomes effective. And if you can deal with some of the inefficiencies of innovation, you can find your way to a solution that will be the best solution for an organization. And I firmly believe that. And I'm fine with the risk. I'm 100% fine with the risk. Because I have to work for like 100 more years. So I might as well take the risks now before I retire. Assuming I live that long.
Well, we hope so. One last quick question before we go to the panel. Earlier this morning, Frank Yanis from FDA was talking about the role he sees for blockchain and distributed ledgers in food safety inspections. And what I heard was that he sees the real role for FDA as it's helping encourage the standards and interoperability, maybe becoming a trusted node in that system, but not building the system for food inspection. I'm curious with HHS, and there are lots of projects, not just one, but as you start to approach ways to bring distributed ledgers to these different problem sets and data sets, is there more sort of ownership of the ledger or the permissioning system for HHS, or do you see it as more of that, let's build the standards and let other stakeholders come?
What's interesting about the healthcare space is that healthcare occurs at an individual level. All right, and the challenge with that is you get a lot of data at the individual level, and it's hard to aggregate it and share it. So I see the role of HHS as governing the data set itself, but allowing for execution, behavior to actually occur at the individual level. That's why I think blockchain is such a powerful tool in the Department of Health and Human Services. So whether we create the initial infrastructure and establish a node and share it, and private industry innovates off of that and makes it better or not, does not matter to me. But it's how do you connect each individual in this room? Like right now, if you wanted to share a thought with one another, you'd have to say it out loud, right? But you couldn't just say it out loud and share it with Jim, because if you said it out loud, everybody in the room would hear it. But what if you had the ability where I could communicate with each of you individually and not share it with everybody else and actually say it out loud? It's a very powerful tool, capability that blockchain provides. And in the healthcare space, that is extremely important because I need to interact with you individually. I need to take care of you individually. But the understanding of the data that I'm receiving from you could benefit everybody in this room, right? So we don't need to own it. We need to make sure that there's a governing body that establishes some rules and some norms for how we collect data and how we share data. But I think the innovation will actually occur in private industry. And I think government taking the first step is a big thing because it says it's okay. And once we say it's okay, we know the folks in private industry will go and build something that maybe we could never imagine. So that's the way I think about it.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there. I see, additional and longer conversations to follow on this. I hope we get to do them soon, but it'd be bad form to stiff your component CIOs on your first week on the job. So we'd like to get you back to HHS.
Yeah, I'm going to leave. So thank you guys.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you very, very much.
Good to see you.